Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Vanderbloemen Leadership Podcast. I'm so excited to get to introduce you to my friends over the years. It's been, 10 years now we've been doing this, and it seems like we keep meeting new people. I've got a brand new friend that I want to introduce you to. Many of you know Willie Robertson. Willie, thanks for joining us today.
It's good to be here. What's going on?
Oh, not much, man. For those who've been living under a rock for the last forever number of years, Willie lives in Louisiana. Willie hunts ducks. What else should we say, Willie, to introduce people to you?
Oh man, a couple of more things, but that'll work. I can go by that.
That's awesome. I'm a little ill-equipped. I don't hunt. I play golf, which is another way to spend a lot of time outside. But I found the Texans won yesterday. We don't win much, but I got one camouflage piece of
Wow,
clothing, and that's it. So
that's the
maybe you
one.
hook.
That's the one you drug out, huh?
That's the one I drug out. Yeah, yeah. It's that. What is the month of November? Is Veterans Month in the NFL? So here we go. That's all you got.
Well, you didn't have to tell me you didn't hunt. I could tell by that clean, nice, beautiful face you got there. That's not out in the north wind too often, except for maybe deep in football season when the Texans are playing.
Well, last many years when the Texans are playing, we go find other things to do. But this year it's a little bit better.
Yeah, they're looking good. Yeah, I'm excited for that team.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, you're not
yeah.
that far away from me down there in Houston.
No, we've got good Cajun food right here. There's a pretty strong pipeline from Louisiana to Texas with all the offshore stuff that goes on. So
Yeah, we
yeah,
let a few out over there. So, yeah, nice place. Always enjoy visiting down there.
that's great. So Willie, I would love it if you would tell people a little bit how you guys got started. Like you kind of shot into stardom. I remember, golly, 11 or 12 years ago, I was at Judd Wilhite's church in Vegas and saw you and your dad come in and do a weekend thing on Father's Day, that sort of thing. And the wave was just starting to go, but people don't know the story. And I'd love to hear a little bit of the origin story of how you guys ended up where you are right now.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I remember when Duck Dynasty came out, 2012, and someone asked me, "What's it like being a overnight sensation?" I said, "Well, Dad started the business in 1972, so I don't know what your idea of overnight is. It seemed like it took a while to finally mature and get to this level, but so it was a slow, steady climb, I guess, in the business sense." Dad started the idea of building his own duck call. So it was right after he came out of, really a life change where he kind of surrendered everything to Jesus. Everything looked lost. We put a movie out last year called The Blind, and it kind of chronicled those years, late 60s, early 70s. So when Dad comes out of that, he and Mom stay together. And they end up moving to West Monroe, and that's when Dad really was able to focus on his business and what he wanted to do, which was hunt ducks, and it's kind of what kept him out of pro football. At least he was a gifted athlete, and kind of the seasons didn't line up with football season and duck season, so he chose hunting season over football season. Terry Bradshaw did play behind him at Louisiana Tech and went on to obviously a lot of success in the NFL. And they both kind of ended up getting there, I guess, in their own ways. But that's when Dad kind of really started pouring into business and kind of what he wanted to see with that. And so it started out just an operation that we ran out of our house. And so I was growing up, I was one of the employees. I didn't really get paid any money, but I was one of the employees that worked for the family business. So I did all the operations of Duck Commander up until I went off to college, which I never saw myself as really being a part of the business. I thought I'm done with that. I'm moving on to something else. And as life had it, it sucked me back in. When I was 30 years old, I came back to take over the business, and he had done all the heavy lifting on that end. And so I came in with some new ideas and kind of hit it perfect timing with the internet websites coming out. And I was able to really get us in that lane and talk to the customers. And Corey and I were running part of the business out of our home, just like we did when we were growing up. And that's when the idea of a TV show came along, and which was Corey's idea, my wife's. And she said, "Willie, you and your family should do a reality TV show. And I was like, Corey, we're just normal people. And she said, Willie, y'all ain't normal. And I really couldn't even see it at the time. And we were approached not long after that by Benelli Shotguns, who offered us a television show on the Outdoor Channel, which we took and did that show. It's successful and business was good. And I kind of thought I had, turned the tides and everything was going the right direction. And a producer in Los Angeles saw that show on the Outdoor Channel, sent a email to the general information box at Duck Commander. Wasn't addressed to anyone, just said, to whom it may concern, I've watched your show and I think you've got a big show. I gave the guy a call and we made a sizzle reel, a 3-minute little sizzle of kind of television, and showed that around. A&E saw it, picked up 2 episodes as pilots, watched those, and then made, at the time, the biggest pickup they'd made, which was 13 episodes, sight unseen. They believed in it and said, we think it's going to be a big show. And there you go. We ended up doing 130 episodes of reality television, and to date it is, and I don't think it'll be beaten the way TV is now, but it's the most watched unscripted show in the history of cable television. So that will help you sell a lot of duck calls if you do that. So I learned the trick. Don't go after just duck hunters. There's another lane somewhere out there.
Well, you hit on something. We do a lot of succession planning. Particularly most of America's commerce is family-owned small businesses. Like that's the backbone of our economy, and it's a lot of what we do is places where the founder's stepping out, the next person's stepping in, and how do you make sure that you don't throw away the old but get the new and that sort of thing. Talk to me a little bit, if you would, about what you've learned about stepping in, because it sounds like and it looks like to me you're smart, your dad's smart, but you came at things from different times in history, and you step in and you've got new ideas. And we were talking before, if you're listening, Willie said, so do you ever go by Willie? And I said, well, once or twice in college. I probably don't want to remember that, but no, because my mother was stubborn. And he said, well, my daddy was stubborn and just named me Willie. So you got a strong-willed founder who's done a good job and met Jesus, and then you're coming in with new ideas. What was that like? What do you wish you would have known going in? What would you tell people who are about to enter that season themselves, following a founder?
Well, I think in our case, it was very little of it was planned out. I think when you think about a succession plan, you think of planning everything out, and then life, it just doesn't always happen that way. And so, I think Dad and I are a lot alike. So we have similar personality traits, which is probably why when I left, I said, I'm not working in this business. I got my own ideas. And so I think we both have strong personalities. And yet, in his new way of living, as far as a faith life, I just knew the authenticity of what he had. He's a real deal. And his faith was very important to him. And so we shared that. And so that always kept us on the same page. And then, so I had a lot of respect for him. And when I came back, I could almost see it from the outside looking in. I was able to see like kind of the genius of what he had done, and just kind of what he had believed in and all that. And so I was able to step in at first in that role just to really follow him and just kind of see what all he was trying to do. And so I was really just kind of a right-hand man and traveling with him a lot. I could see that he was, he's a very had a commanding presence with people, and really believed in it, believed in his product. So I was able to take that and then look at it from a sales perspective, and probably more importantly, a marketing perspective of what he had. He was so unique. He had this long beard and this hair, and kind of mysterious, and really die hard in what he did. And so there was no phoniness there. And so I was able to take that, really market that with other companies. And probably the best thing I did was really network with other companies to really push our brand, but also push their brands. And so I was able to go in the hunting space and the outdoor world and connect with other brands who had big marketing budgets, and we're looking for people to push their products, and especially authentic people, and which would end up being, in a reality show, I think that's what people are looking for in the same way. They're looking for authenticity and people who are real, not just phonies who are doing whatever it takes to get on television. So it all kind of came together, and it was a great training ground. None of it was kind of zero to hero. It was over time. There was able time for things to get mature. We had done even before the first television show on the Outdoor Channel, we had made technically VHS tapes in the 80s, DVDs of our hunts. So we'd been around cameras. I think we were all good storytellers, which I think is very important. We learned that growing up, just how to tell good stories. And so our hunting videos were telling stories of the hunting season. Then once we get into television in the Outdoor Channel, we were to learn that craft there, and then to take that all the way to, regular cable television show and able to tell even bigger stories, and then kind of pivot out of just hunting and go into life and children and family. And so we saw a lot of things that were people saw that were attractive, which was just more fruits coming out of the spirit that lives in us, love and joy and peace. And they saw these ideas, which I think when we started television on A&E, I don't know that they thought that would work. As far as reality TV, typically that was train wreck and certainly not fruits of the spirit. It was more of fighting and cursing and controversy. So we were able to kind of flip the script on that and make it different, where we were able to have fun, and that's where the comedy came in too, and people were able to laugh. And I think probably now in these times, you probably miss that more than ever. Just being able to sit down and watch something and laugh together without being so serious and drama filled. So yeah, that's kind of the genesis of it, where it came from, and how Phil and I were able to do that. And so I was able to come in at that point, and Phil was at the point where he was able to yield that over, and he could see the traits that I had that probably he didn't have, and honestly he didn't even desire to have. He didn't really want to run a business, do budgets and pro formas and all that kind of stuff. He just wanted to hunt and sell enough duck calls. And so yeah, we worked as a team on that and as a family, and stayed together as a family. And then there were always the other family members as well, my brothers and other people that worked for us as well, that really filled those spots and filled those roles of what they wanted to do. And when I took over as the CEO, I think it's important to know what your people want, and it's not always money. It's not just money. Sometimes it's other things. It's time. It's whatever it is that can, what they're looking for. And so I just tried to satisfy those needs and to build the brand bigger, and we were able to do that.
And did you guys talking about you and your dad, the handoff and all? Did you guys ever butt heads, like we had never done it that way, but Dad, this is the way the world works now? Any instances like that?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, they were more comical. They were more funny than they were serious. I
Well,
don't
now
know.
you've got my attention.
I
I want to
just,
hear what.
yeah. There never was really like a big sit down, like and I always appreciated that about Phil, is he pretty much just said, "You got it," and go with it. And Phil just looked at him and said, "Make sure I get a check," So he just wanted to make sure he got paid. And I said, "All right, I think I can pull that off." There were some things that were funny. The whole idea of a website. I went to Dad and I said, "We need a website," and because he's my business partner, so I'm trying to like fill him in. And he's like, "A website? What is that?" And I said, "Well, they go on a computer and they can order products." And Phil said, "Nah." He said, "Tell them if they want a duck call to pick up the phone and call." And I said, "Well, Dad, I think that they're going to order things in a different way," which I understood. He never owned a computer, so he's never had one, so he doesn't understand what that's like. He doesn't own a cell phone, so he doesn't understand that either. So that was one. I remember he did get a little frustrated when I told him we were no longer selling VHS tapes. He thought I'd lost my mind. He was like, what else are they going to watch? I said, "Well, Dad, there's newer ones called DVDs, and they're way better. You don't have to rewind them." And he was like, "I think you're making a bad call on this one." And I said, "Well, I think it's the way to go." Even television, he wasn't warm to the idea of even doing a television show. He didn't think it would be, he didn't think people would watch or it'd be successful. And so I think after a while, like if once I was able to kind of prove him wrong on some of these ideas that I had. I think at some point he kind of stepped back and said, okay, you seem to be making it work. We're making more money. The brand's growing. So I'll get out of the way even more.
And did you? So now let me shift gears a little bit. So we started in 2008. Really we got lucky and really right place, right time. Kind of took off. Not because I'm good or anything. It was just a lot of circumstances that lined up that I didn't even know were happening. Right. And I quit counting at 15 different pitches for a reality show because I think everybody was trying to do reality show.
Mm.
We have 7 kids, so it was like, well, let's do one about family with 7 kids and run around. We help churches find their pastor. Well, let's do like an American Idol for a church, and we're like, that is not going to work. Like, there's some confidentiality, but there was an allure to getting in front of the lights, but also a real concern that that would hurt our mission. Did you guys have concerns about cameras coming on and having your life broadcast all over the place?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything like that, you have concerns, and so you kind of look at the good things, the bad things. I think we had some Christians who straight up told us like, you're going to ruin your family if you do this, and look at kind of look at the examples of other people that's been on television. But we really just had this fortitude that said, well, if it's not us, then who? Who, like,
Right.
if we're not in that slot, then who's in that slot? And I think when our show came out, it was a sort of a bright light, in a bunch of shows that weren't that bright or that wholesome, and we kind of stuck a flag in that spot and said, hey, we'll take this spot. We felt very confident of uh, who we were all about, who lived in us, who are not that we're perfect, but we knew we had a message. In fact, when I went to Dad and I said, told him about this is after we had done the Outdoor Channel show, and then I talked to the producers and we looked at a show on A&E, and Phil's like, nah, I'm not interested in. And I said, well, Dad, I think it's a way to get the gospel out to more people. We'll have a bigger platform to do that. And kind of sat in his chair and he said, well, I didn't think about that. And he goes, well, if it'll get the gospel out to more people, and then he gives me the thumbs up. So, which I think it has. I think through our books and podcasts and everything else, I think we've been able to use that. So, yeah, we just weren't ones to shy back, and and so I think I can understand the people that would maybe choose not to do that. And I think we're all together as a family. We really talked about it, and we prayed about it and said, hey, if it, we kind of set up some boundaries and said, look, if it gets beyond if we feel like we're not doing it for the right reasons, and God can take it away, we can do something different. And so we're launched in, and we definitely saw, his hand on that. So you never know. I mean, but again, we felt like there was in a certain way, God had prepared us. Looking back, I felt like that, you think about like John the Baptist, like he was this guy who came out of the wilderness, and he wore strange clothes and ate strange things. And he just had that one mission in life, was just to point people towards Jesus, and which he did. And so it was like God prepared, and Isaiah actually prophesied about that he would come out and be like that. So sometimes things that are different can really be in God's plan. And we felt like that perhaps he had been preparing us the whole time for something like this. And I mean, I can look at Sadie and what the ministry she's doing. I mean, all over the world, and millions of people. And so perhaps I'm just a small part of that that plays into some generational change that is able to bring that. And so, and so I think when you see those opportunities, you either shy back or you go into it. And, we're all about preaching the gospel. And so you can see that through Jesus's ministry, how he was often around things that people didn't see at the time. Were like, what's he doing? Who's he talking to? And, but that ability to be able to go hit the world where they are, which is exactly what happened with Phil. Like, Phil was at a bar, a preacher went up there and went into the bar and shared the gospel with him, and he was able to obey it. If they were going to wait for him to go to a church building, it never would have happened. So being able to go out there and confront the world where it's at, and do that. And what a great way to do it through a television show, and then you can come out with more things, even the movie and all the other things where you can teach more people. But it's really sticking to those, that Great Commission, making disciples and baptizing people and teaching people in Matthew 28, just sticking to that mission. And so we felt like this could certainly fall within that mission, and we could use that to do it in an even bigger way than we were doing it before. Although I will say we were still doing the same things before, it was just on a smaller scale.
Sure, sure. Now, do you? I think about your show, and it started 12 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little. I don't know. I don't know that it get picked up now because not because of you, but like the temperature toward publicly displaying faith and trying to tell other people they should be a part of it is it's under fire a little bit right now. Did y'all feel any pressure? Did you have to kind of we got to cut that out? That's too much proselytizing, evangelizing, whatever the thing is, or how'd that work?
No, it really wasn't. I think a lot of people would expect me to say yes, but it really wasn't the case. They really weren't. Again, once it became successful, a lot of people just get out of the way and go like, whatever it is working. Hey, if you're looking at it from a purely business or television standpoint, but there wasn't pushback on the prayer at the end. I mean, there really wasn't. We kept it in the lane. We understood what we were doing. I think the only one Dad always wanted. Dad would say, "Well, I want more preaching on the show." I said, "Dad, there's another Robertson family that has a show like that. It's called the 700 Club. So, like, let's let them do that. Let's do what we do. If they want to know more, they can come ask. But we don't. Just like I don't like things shoved down my throat. I mean, we don't shove it down your throat. But this is how we live, and it's not a full sermon every time. But certainly the elements are there. And so, but no, I think they were. And I don't know. I don't know that a show. I think it could come out. I don't know if that's maybe in certain circumstances, but I find that they really are open, and I think even more. I think we'll see that even more, where they're kind of looking for something that points people the way. I think it's obviously how you do it is important, if but who knows? It's a good question.
Well, you guys have done an amazing job of being disarming and authentic, and at the same time being on mission, trying to. I say our job. Maybe y'all have the same idea. I just want to overpopulate heaven. Like that's all I want to do.
Yeah,
I'd love to have a meeting with Jesus. And say, why'd you bring all these people?
yeah, exactly.
Because you said so. We're going to bring them all.
Right.
Like so. What advice would you give business leaders who are listening today about how they can show and share their faith in a way that is winsome and not pushing people away?
Well, I think that one thing I learned when the show came out, it was none of the things that most reality shows had at the time. So there was no cursing, nudity, fighting. We had a prayer at the end, and the fact that show went to the top and became the most watched show ever, and for many years it was one of the top shows on television. It showed me one thing, that you don't have to be like the world to be successful in the world. And so I think for business leaders, I think we think, well, we're going to have to sacrifice some of our morals to be able to, uh, succeed in this business world. And I just don't know that that's the case. I think you can really, you can be kind to people and have answers for them and have hope for them and have environments that can be rich with, the spirit and things of the Lord, and you don't have to sacrifice those things. And really, if you think about the world, not try to be so adversarial with it, but try to convert it and try to go after it. And so that would be my advice, was that, I still think our mission's the same. It doesn't change just because that mission from Matthew 28. I think that's the same, and it can happen in our workplaces. And so I would argue that being more spiritual, more evangelistic, and more of faith, particularly in our business with our faith, has increased business. And and I've seen that in other businesses as well, where they don't shout back. And you know, I spoke last week at Hobby Lobby, and man, that is quite the facility.
It is quite the place, isn't it?
It's unbelievable.
Yes.
And yeah, and I sat with the family, had lunch with them, and they don't shy back from their faith at all. And but
No.
they're good to their employees, and I think um, they don't make everyone be converted to the Lord, but they put out so many things that are helpful to people and kind to people and their employees and all that. So I think that's another great example of someone who doesn't shy back from that.
I think you're right. And I think, there was an age where people wanted to, let's just not offend anyone. I think a lot of people are still living in that, oh, let's just not offend anyone. I think what I see from the outside looking in, and you may disagree, your authenticity and sticking to true to who you are, your faith is who you are. So it's the
Yeah,
authenticity that disarms people.
right.
It's not a canned thing. It's not this is who I am. Jesus lives in me, and this is what we do. And hope you like it.
And if they don't, they don't. And we still got to get along with each other, you know,
That's right.
even if. And so I think, and sometimes we're so, especially in this um, cycle right now we're in, which is that we're so geared for the fight. And I think Christians get caught up in that as well. Um, is we do let a fight fuel us, and so we want to fight. We're looking for something to fight, and I think we just got to be careful of that. And like in my new book, one of the chapters is called "Hope Yeller," because I think so many believers we're just spewing out so much bad news, and how bad it is, and bad it is in the environment, bad it is in the country. Everything's so bad, and it's almost like our calling. We feel like we're called to tell others how bad everything is. Where I think we were called to give hope and called to give good news, which is what the gospel is, which is good news. And so, I think we always need to remember we got to have the good news flowing out of our mouths, not just the bad. And because we'll get in our buildings and yell and scream at what's going on out there, but very few times do we actually go out there and actually, take
Yeah.
that to other people. And so it begins this fight. And Jesus, where he was fighting against religious leaders and kind of, I think, the judgmentalness, but, he never was calling for this giant fight all the time. It's really
No.
for, he's looking at the world saying, this is who I came for. This is, Zacchaeus. I came to seek and save what was lost. People who, and so we just got to watch that fighting mentality that we seem to
Yeah.
love.
Yeah. I grew up going to church, but it not being very real. And then I had an awakening, and it got real fast. And I had to learn to step into this identity of being a Christian, because I kind of been pushing back. Those people don't have a brain. There's people that don't think. And I remember I used to hate the word evangelical, because I thought it just made me think of angry people.
Yeah.
And then I ended up going to seminary and all this, and took a class, and had to take Greek because it was required. So and realized the word evangelical literally just means messenger of good news.
Hmm.
That's all it means.
That's it. Yeah.
And I had associated it with people who were mad and angry and shouting, and it ought to go back to the way it used to be. And that's not it at all, man. And I think that's why you've been so magnetic and you've stuck. You know,
Yeah, I think we've got to watch. Yeah, I had a sermon I did call it, and that was one of the aspects was you'll hear people say we need to go back like it used to be, and so I'm trying to figure out what that time is exactly,
yeah,
because for whatever we think was something good back in some decade, there was probably several things that were so bad, and things that were not going
that's
that
right.
weren't good for another group of people. Um, and so I think that's where it's getting back to, ultimately where we want to get to is heaven, where it's right. And so we've failed on so many levels here on earth and so many levels. And it goes back to just being, what I call my book gospelers, which is just people who share the gospel with people,
Yeah,
and you just always have it on your lips. And, you have good news for people. And if people accept it, that's great. And if they don't, you keep going. And, it's really about planting seeds. And sometimes I'll have conversation that may last 20 minutes, some may last 2 days, some may last 20 years, that I have with
Yeah.
people that I'm still talking to them. I'm still that, base where they can come back and search for it. And it may be at a different point in their life where they come back going, now I've gotten older now,
Yeah.
things aren't the same. And so maybe it can be more attractive. Um, and I think we can be successful. I think as Christians, I think even with the business and money and finances, I think we've kind of shied back and let the world kind of own that space. And so I think we've seen the advantages of when we should star, we should stick out, we should be, people who are innovative and hardworking. And so I think we can do all those things and still be known, not by that, not by our love for money or not by our callousness with business. We're still known by um, having the gospel on our lips and being people of faith, but also being smart at business and marketing and business. And
Yeah.
we can use money for great things, and so we can compete in those areas and not just, it's kind of like what I was saying with television. If you just let the world have it all, well, don't be surprised whenever that's all you get, which is what
That's right.
they're shoving out to you. And so I think business is the same way.
It sounds like one of my favorite things to ask, and I do want to talk about your book. When you sit down to write Gospeller, you've written books. They're not fun to write. They take forever. You got to sit down. It's like,
Yeah.
so it better be a pretty important, for me, it had to be a pretty important message I needed to get out for me to write a book every time I've done it.
Yeah.
What was the thing inside you that made you say Gospelers needs to be out? And give us a little overview of what you're trying to get done in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. This one actually was fun. I really enjoyed this more than any other book I've written. It wasn't just a project. It wasn't just like, um, it was long, but it was every word I really poured over and just wanted to make sure, it's different when you feel like God's got one. He's got a message that he wants you to get out. And so that can really change uh, really what you want to get out. Looking back, it was almost even in the moment. I felt like God was just laying this thing out for me, going, "This is the time, and this is what I want you to do." And there were a couple of different things. One was uh, the first chapter was the impact of the movie. We made that movie ourselves called The Blind, and it was about Phil and Kay's journey. And it just struck me about their lives, and I thought, what if that wouldn't have happened? Like, what if no one would have shared with Phil? What would my life look like? And the answer is obvious. It would look completely different. I'm sure I wouldn't be talking to you right now. So I don't know where I'd be or what I'd be doing, but because it wouldn't have been involved with the same family. Dad, I don't know that I ever would have seen him again. And so just the impact of that one conversation that guy had, with my father at the right time and planted that seed, really shaped the rest of my life, who I married, my children, all of those things, the business, obviously, a television show, none of that would have happened looking backwards. So I'm appreciative looking back, but then looking forward, I'm like, well, who is it that I could tell? Who is it that could hear this, change their lives? It could change their marriage. It could change their children, their grandchildren. You're talking about generational change that can happen. And so that was part of the message I wanted to get out. This happened during COVID, so it was for me. It was I just stopped, and like I wasn't speaking. I wasn't. So life kind of get interrupted, which was I think sometimes that's important in whatever way. And so I was able to look at and think about the message I want to get out. I had a conversation, speaking of Houston, with Lee Strobel. Lee was teaching a class on evangelism um, at a conference I was at. I was there speaking as well, and I just bebopped into his. I didn't even know who he was. I didn't know that. I'd never heard of his story, and he kept mentioning a book he had written. I didn't know the book, and he just talked about how a specific ministry of sharing the faith should be in more churches than it is, where it's actually training and teaching people how would you walk through that. And because I think that the art of sharing our faith is becoming more and more just a lost art.
Yeah.
The expectations are on the pastor to do it. Somebody should do it, but most of us as a church don't feel like we're qualified. And then I went through a whole laundry list of excuses that we all make that we don't. I don't know the Bible well enough. I'm shy. It's not my gift. It's, there's a lot of things that we disqualify ourselves. And so that was playing all apart. And then I was at a local church here, and I'd mentioned a specific ministry, and did we have one at our church? And they didn't. And like any good pastor, he called me up and said, "Hey, I heard you have a heart for the lost. You want to start that ministry?" I guess I stepped into this one. So I launched into that. So it was fascinating to actually. It was almost like I was collecting my own data from the people I was talking to, and so I was hearing their heart on.
Mm.
Because in fact, this particular place was like maybe they got 3,000 members, which is a large church. And so I went to them and I said, "Well, who is known for sharing their faith? I want to write their names down so I can, at least have my initial group." Uh, you know how many names I got? One, one name out of 3,000 people. It was insane. And I thought, well, we can certainly improve on this. And so then I just saw this really hunger and thirst for people who are wanting to do that, wanting to know, how would you do that? How would you share that? And so I was doing that as well. And it almost like the book started just writing itself as
Mm.
far as what I was trying to tell people, how to do that intentional. And I didn't write the book it's not really pastors. It's more for the church. It's more for the
Yeah.
people so that you can, when you're sitting with a friend or you're sitting with someone perhaps you just met on an airplane, at least gives you a starting point. Or really, just a few passages that I use. I use generally about 7 passages where I walk people through it, talk about their life, gather their story, find out where they're at, and then see if you can point them to Jesus, and at least they'll know some of these terms that in the New Testament. And when you do that, there's so many other values that will help you. So it helps me to study my Bible more, because when people ask me questions, I want to know. I don't want to have to text the pastor and say, "What do I tell them here? What do I tell?" And so I want to be able to find those things out for myself and walk them through that. And then I put a bunch of stories in there about people that I'd share with, and a bunch of some comical and middle of the night. It looks more like the book of Acts. And so if you read the book of Acts and watch these people as they were converted, notice when they happen, what time they happen. These aren't Sunday morning things. They're not
That's
Sunday
right.
morning at church. Not that can't happen at a Sunday morning church service, but so many of the conversations happen, in the middle of the night, on the weekend, at
Yes.
deer camp, all these places that I'm at with people on an airplane. Uh, and that's where these conversations can happen, and you can really get into people's lives and start that. And then what I'm trying to do is tie them to the New Testament, let them read for themselves. And I don't judge. I just, most of the time I don't even really know who they are.
Mhm.
I'm sharing the good news with you. I'm following that, and that's the whole case I make is from the Great Commission, Matthew 28, those 3 principles. And from the commission, I can pull the mission. And once I'm on mission, once that's my mission, once I know my mission, I find that's a lot easier knowing your mission. And so what I found is a lot of people they're kind of off mission. And so, for instance, they may think their mission is to try to go to church as much as I can and be a good
Right.
person. And that's not a clear mission in and of itself. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not what Jesus said to do, but yet I find so many people that's what, and so their lives wonky because they're not really clear on what their mission is here on this earth. And so Jesus gave a pretty clear mission. And then as we see at the beginning of, in Acts 1 and Acts 2, I mean, you can see the people he told that to, started living that out, living that mission. And and the question is were those people like were they just some super duper religious people who,
Right.
that's not us. That's, Peter, John, these, but what we see in Acts chapter 4, where when the people in their community described them, it said they were ordinary and unschooled people, but yet they took note because they had been with Jesus. Like something happened. They knew something was different about them. So when you get into unschooled and uh, ordinary people, that's most of us. Most of us
That's right.
feel that's where we're at, and that's what these guys were doing. And so, yeah, just try to connect those dots to get people to where they can say, "Hey, I'm going to go do that." And I've heard that people have come to me saying, hey, I finally went and talked to my uncle or my aunt or a friend at work, and I've been trying to get up the courage. And man, I read that book, and it really gave me the encouragement to go do that, and that's what it was all about. So, yeah, books can be long to pull off, and the promotions and all the things that go along with it. But I've never been prouder of a book, and I'm glad I was able to capture those stories down, if nothing else, just for my family and my kids to read and say, hey, man, this is what was most important to me. It wasn't television. It wasn't business. It wasn't all these things. And I think, business people, if you can get your employees like that, and if you can get your family like that, if you can get them on mission, man, it'll make a whole lot of other things better as far as,
That's right.
throughout life, is when they've got that on right. The
Well,
marriages will be
and
better.
when I was a new believer and I was so frustrated nobody'd share their faith. When I was a young pastor, I thought, we ought to do a salary structure for pastors that pays them per baptism. That'd get
Ooh.
them busy. Then I remembered that's kind of what Rome did right before the Reformation. So
Yeah,
we
I was
don't need to
fixing to
do
say, I can see where that could go wrong. I like the idea, but yeah,
that. Yeah.
that's kind
But
of what
but
they
but
did.
as a new believer, I kind of thought I gotta close this deal. I gotta get them to trust in Jesus right now. What I love about your work, your life, and this book is it's not about closing the deal. It's about keep planting the seeds, and God will
Hmm.
close the deal when the deal needs to get closed. And that frees a lot of people to say, "Oh, I don't have to like get them to sign something," or no,
Right.
keep planting seeds.
Plant the seed, let God, yeah, God will do the rest. And so, I think there is something to, where how can they hear unless someone tells them,
That's
like
right.
we do have to have it. Paul was praying that the mystery of the gospel, or he actually asked for prayers that the mystery of the gospel could come out of his mouth more clearly. And so, and which was interesting because Paul knew the gospel better than anyone, yet he was still praying. He was still running into people who weren't understanding. And so it also says, become all things to all men. Always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that we have. And so there's so many passages in the New Testament about sharing what it is. And I think I put in the book, like, you know, a lot of people come to the Lord and they're never told that's part of the deal. It's
Yeah.
never said like, hey, now you need to go out and kind of make the case. What if it's the whole deal? The whole deal is about, you've got it. That's great. Now it's about giving it away to people who don't. And so again, that can be a real mission. And once that can change your whole perspective in life, once you look at it through there. And probably the biggest thing is it keeps us from being so selfish, because I think a lot of people show up to a building and they just want something for them. Like, get me
Yeah.
through this week. Let me hear something. I want to hear, let me hear some good music, so that I can go out, get through my week, and I can have my quiet time. I can have my prayer time. But so much is inner reflected and not outward. And so, yeah, I think that's what Dad was always about, and still is, honestly, still, so I was able to see that modeled of all the stuff I saw with hunting and business and all that. Man, that was the number one thing. Never was a question. That was, to this day, that's mostly what we talk about is sharing the gospel and who we're talking to, and all that. And so I was able to see that, and then able to take that in myself, and then go even deeper in that. And it's fun, just this past weekend, Sadie had a big conference of girls, and I was able to see that same thing with my kids now doing the same thing. And I think as a dad and as a guy, like it's probably the most satisfaction I can get on
That's
this earth,
awesome.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you, I have young girls, 5 daughters and 2 boys, and the girls are like, "Oh, you're gonna be able to, oh, that's her dad." It's like
Yeah.
our signature may end up being, "Oh, you were her dad, or you
Oh
helped."
no, yeah, I'm mostly referenced as Sadie's dad now. I got these people in the airport going, "Are you Sadie's dad?" And I'm like, "I."
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
Which I'll take that. I'll take that as a compliment.
That's good. Hey, before I let you go, one question I like to ask people who, you've been on a bit of a rocket ride,
Hmm.
and you seem to have managed it well. But there's always the man. I wish I'd have seen that coming. Well, if you could go back and visit with a younger you from maybe 20 years ago, what do you know now that you wish you would have known then?
Everything. I mean, I've, uh, I probably made more mistakes for sure than certainly in business I did. Yeah, but just not, not getting so caught up in it. And I share that in the book, even in Gospeller. I go through how I think I said it almost took my soul. This whole Duck Dynasty, and man, it's coming really fast at one time, and it's hard to. It was hard as a business to keep that all in perspective, and I think even personally, there was a lot of burden of just have been in that much limelight and the media and just all these things. And so trying to um, just getting lost in that, and I described like the fire, the fire that I have, which if you read the book, you'll see the fire. But, when that show was rolling, man, I said it was like there was a bed of coals there. There wasn't any fire coming out. It was still warm,
Right.
but it needed some fresh wind. It needed some more firewood thrown on it to get it going. And so I think that's the, you know, just to really take more advantage, even at the moment of it spiritually, and
Yeah.
always, keep that tether back to the gospel and back to God. Because you can look up and um, I think in 1 Corinthians 15, which is kind of the crux of my book, where Paul is describing the gospel as a reminder. But he says, if you hold firm,
Yes.
to the gospel, and so you have to hold firm to that, and just remember that in those times. I think it's easier in bad times, but I think in really good times, that's where it can kind of get away from you.
Oh,
It's
that's the
like,
worst.
when I say good times, I'm saying worldly success, or money or
Yes.
whatever, fame or whatever that is, uh, those are the times that can really slip in, and
Uh
you can
huh.
look up, you can, I talk about a boat, because I grew up on a river, so and knocking your propeller off, and you can look up on water and you can be way away from where, where you were trying,
Yeah.
where you thought you were going, and you have gotten way off course. And so, so yeah, that's part of the things I think, and yeah, I mean, just being patient. I think, especially for people today, young people, and this is not necessarily what I wish I would have known, but it was more forced. But it's just be patient, and things, um, I think people want it so fast now, and
That's
so
right.
especially my kids, they want this thing fast, and Dad waited decades before this ever. Like I said at the beginning, it took a long time for us to get there, and so
Yeah.
just keep building it, keep and as long as you're happy and content, I think there's something to being content and saying, hey, we're good. We don't have to keep pushing that and pressing it. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes in business we just want to
It's so good. The
drive so
timing.
fast, we're like, it's got to happen, and if it's not in 2 years, then abandon, rebuild, reshape, but there's something to it just about sticking with it, being there year after year.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes. There's uh, the last time the Lord spoke before Jesus was born. I think there's about a 400-year span.
Yeah,
A lot of quiet time, waiting on
exactly.
something to happen. But that's how it worked. And I love what you say because I don't know. In my experience, we're kind of. People would say, "How'd you grow so fast?" Where I said, "Well, we're kind of like the 25-year overnight success. We were plugging along for a long time, and then things took off." But what I never saw coming was, I've failed before, and when you fall down flat on your face, you remember who you are, and hopefully you get back
Hmm.
up and you get going, and it's easy to hold the faith when you're in the middle of failure. What I didn't realize was in success, I'm tempted to forget who I am
Oh yeah.
or
Oh
think
yeah.
I'm a bigger deal than I really am, or
Right.
success is much more the devil's playground in my life than failure.
Oh, I think for sure, because you've got everyone else telling you, especially in my position, because of being famous, that so many people are telling you this, and so you start believing, going, "Yeah, I
Right.
am. Yeah, I did do this," and so, yeah, you've got to be very cautious of that, because then it can be gone just as quickly, and it's
Yes.
these things come and they go and they swing or whatever, and so yeah, and I think that's the bridge. I think to answer your question, your overall question, which is this, I think it's having some of the older principles and that wisdom, from dad, mom, that generation, and you're able to gap that, to hold on to some of that, but also be open to some new, to the new, and to what that is, and then as you pass that on, which is going to happen whether you like it or not, um, is that gets passed on to other people, and hopefully they can do the same way. They can look for the innovation, look for the new, but also still hold to some of those kind of old school principles, and again, every one of them hopefully are tethered to the Word and to the Bible. They're tethered to Christ. They're tethered to God. Because once that gets off, then it's anything can happen at that point.
Tethered to God, tethered to the Word, maybe not tethered to VHS tapes.
Exactly. Yeah. Some you got to know when to cut that tether, cut that rope off, and move
Well, that's the
on.
wisdom I'm praying for all the time, is to know, the message doesn't change, but the method does. So I think it
Hmm.
takes enormous discernment to figure out what parts of things are permanent. And it's the first commandment God gave the priests in the Old Testament after all the sacrifice, this for this and this for that, this for this for that. The first thing he says is, now your job is to distinguish the sacred from the ordinary, or the
Hmm.
timeless from the timed.
Yeah.
And that's what I hear you doing.
Yeah.
I love it. I think you've got a great succession story in you. I'm kind of like, all I have is a hammer, so everything looks like a nail,
Hmm.
But I hear this, how you honored your dad and how you
Right.
stuck to the past, but at the same time reach for new. That's the trick, man. You've done a great job.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I've been. It's always still trying to do it even better. And then, yeah, even at this stage of my life, and seeing what's next and what other opportunities. And so, yeah, we're in a good spot and get, like all my kids are, most of them are here, and I can hit them all with a set of golf clubs from my house. So I like that they're all near and in some capacity, in some way, working with. In the business or around our new businesses, and we have new ones coming out as well. So, yeah, it's fun, and I think that that's something. And so a lot of people ask me that, even as a dad, like, how does that happen, and how do how are you able to maintain that relationship, and so that again, that's what I've learned from the Word, and then also with working together as family, which a lot of people can look at and be like, oh, I don't want to work with my family. That would be awful. But it can be really positive. It can be good. All the stuff that we can share together.
Yeah, we're in the same spot, and it took me a while to realize I've got a lot more time with my kids as they are adults than I ever did when they were little.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh
I'm the
yeah,
same
it's
way.
not
Yeah.
to be missed. Well, Willie, if people want to find gospelers, if they want to hear more about you, where should they look? What's an easy place to go?
Yeah. You can find the book anywhere they're selling books. Obviously, Amazon and Willie. What is my website? Willie Robertson. WillieRobertson.com. Yeah, you can go there, and I do a lot of speaking. I'm out speaking a lot. I'm heading out in the morning, doing some stuff in some prisons, and so yeah, we got some more speeches coming up. So yeah, I just love uh, the time I have left on this earth, just trying to give people the gospel and be a bright light. That's my prayer always, and so yeah, but you can find it at any of those places.
That's great. Well, you're doing a great job shining a light, Willie. I really appreciate you. Appreciate you making time for us today. Thanks
My
very
pleasure.
much.
Thank
Yeah,
you, William.
and thank you guys for listening. I hope it's helpful to you. Go to vandercast.com. You'll get all the show notes and that sort of thing. We won't send you emails about buying duck decoys or anything else from us. So just be show notes, real simple. So vandercast.com. Thanks for tuning in. I hope to hear from you what we can do better, and also get to introduce you to even more of my friends as the days go on. Thanks for tuning in.